In this video, we explore the third chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, focusing on the dialogue between Krishna and Arjuna. We begin with Arjuna's dilemma in verses 1 and 2, where he questions the necessity of engaging in war if knowledge is considered superior to action. In response, Krishna outlines the twofold path of spiritual discipline: Jnana Yoga, the path of knowledge for those inclined toward contemplation, and Karma Yoga, the path of selfless action for those dedicated to duty. Verse 3.4 highlights that one cannot reach perfection merely by abandoning work. True renunciation, or sannyasa, is an internal state of detachment from results, rather than a physical withdrawal from one's responsibilities. Krishna explains in verse 3.5 that inaction is impossible. All beings are constantly driven by the three gunas, sattva, rajas, and tamas, which compel physical and mental activity, making action a biological and psychological necessity. Verse 3.6 defines the hypocrite as one who restrains physical actions but remains mentally attached to sensory desires. Krishna emphasizes that true self-control must originate from within the mind to be sincere. Conversely, verse 3.7 praises the superior individual who controls their senses with the intellect while engaging in work without attachment. This form of karma yoga is presented as the ideal path for spiritual growth. In verse 3.8, Krishna mandates the performance of one's prescribed duties, noting that physical survival itself requires action. Renouncing work entirely is characterized as an unsustainable and unnatural approach. Verse 3.9 introduces the concept of work as a sacrifice, or yajna. By performing duties as an offering to the Supreme, one avoids the bondage caused by personal attachment to the outcomes of their work. Krishna then speaks of the cosmic design in verse 3.10, where humankind and the performance of sacrifice were co-created to ensure prosperity. This selfless spirit of contribution is likened to the wish-fulfilling cow, Kamadhenu. Verse 3.11 highlights the theme of symbiosis. By fostering divine forces through sacrifice, those forces in turn support humanity, creating a cycle of mutual gratitude and cooperation that leads to the highest good. In verse 3.12, Krishna warns against consuming resources without contributing back to the cosmic cycle. Doing so is described as theft, causing karmic imbalance and highlighting the necessity of ethical consumption. Verse 3.13 emphasizes that consuming the remnants of sacrifice purifies the mind and heart. Conversely, those who cook only for self-interest are said to consume sin, underlining the importance of sharing. Verse 3.14 illustrates the cycle of life. Food sustains beings, rain produces food, and sacrifice triggers rain. This chain links human action directly to the natural world, reinforcing the interconnectedness of all elements. Krishna clarifies in verse 3.15 that prescribed duties originate from the Vedas and ultimately the imperishable Lord. Therefore, the all-pervading Supreme is present within the act of sacrifice itself. Concluding this segment, verse 3.16 warns that those who ignore this cosmic cycle and live only for sensory pleasure live in vain. Active participation in this cycle of sacrifice is essential for maintaining universal harmony. Moving to verse 3.17, Krishna describes the self-realized soul. One who finds complete satisfaction and delight within the self alone has no further obligatory duties to perform, as they are fully content. This state of inner joy stems from the realization of the eternal soul. For such individuals, external achievements or societal obligations no longer bind them, leading to true inner peace. In verse 3.18, the theme of transcendence is explored. A self-realized person has no personal agenda for performing duties, nor is there any reason for them to avoid such work. This represents absolute freedom. A liberated soul does not depend on any other being for the fulfillment of any purpose, operating instead from a state of pure inner independence. Verse 3.19 teaches the path of karma yoga, detached action. Krishna instructs us to constantly perform our obligatory duties without being attached to the results, as this leads to spiritual liberation. By dedicating work to a higher purpose rather than personal desire, one purifies their consciousness. This practice helps the individual ultimately attain a state of supreme union with the divine. In verses 3.20 and 3.21, Krishna emphasizes leadership and duty. King Janaka and other great souls achieved perfection through the performance of their responsibilities, setting examples for the welfare of the world. Whatever actions a leader performs, the common people follow. These verses remind us that those in positions of influence have a duty to inspire others through their daily conduct. Verse 3.22 describes divine duty. Krishna explains that even though he has no personal needs or obligations in the three worlds, he continues to perform work to sustain the cosmic order. This serves as the ultimate example of selfless leadership. The Supreme acts not out of desire, but purely to guide humanity and maintain the balance of existence. Verse 3.23 warns of the danger of inaction. Krishna states that if he were to stop working, all humanity would fall into confusion, leading to societal decay and instability. People naturally mirror the standards set by those in high positions. A leader's negligence can establish a destructive blueprint, affecting the moral fabric of society. In verse 3.24, Krishna notes that failure to perform duty would result in the collapse of cosmic order. The responsibility of leadership is vital to maintaining harmony for all living beings. Verse 3.25 highlights the difference between the wise and the ignorant. While the ignorant are attached to the fruits of their actions, the wise work for the welfare of the world, free from attachment. This concept, known as Loka Sangraha, focuses on the solidarity and upliftment of humanity, the enlightened act to guide others, ensuring that society remains on a path of moral and spiritual progress. In verse 3.26, Krishna advises the wise not to disrupt the minds of those who are attached to the fruits of their work. Instead, the wise should inspire them by performing their own duties efficiently. This teaches an inclusive approach. Rather than forcing sudden change, the enlightened act as role models, gently guiding others toward a more detached, selfless understanding of their roles. Verse 3.27 clarifies the origin of action. While the deluded person, blinded by ego, believes they are the sole doer, all actions are actually governed by the modes of material nature, or gunas. Recognizing this allows one to step back from the burden of ego. By understanding the influence of nature, one learns to witness actions objectively, rather than becoming trapped by self-centered pride. Verses 3.28 and 3.29 discuss the perspective of the realized soul. Knowing the distinction between the gunas and the self, the wise remain detached, while the ignorant remain obsessed with the results of their work. Krishna advises the wise not to confuse the ignorant who lack this profound realization. Instead, they should continue to work diligently, helping others steadily progress toward higher understanding. In verse 3.30, the call to action is clear. Krishna urges us to surrender all works to him, focusing on the divine with a mind free from ego, desire, and lethargy to engage in the battle of life. Verses 3.31 and 3.32 promise spiritual liberation to those who follow these teachings with faith and without envy. However, those who disregard this wisdom and follow their own whims are doomed to ignorance and struggle. This emphasizes the importance of trust in the guidance provided. The path to wisdom requires not only knowledge but also a heart free from the bitterness that obstructs spiritual growth. Verses 3.33 through 3.43 address the power of nature, the necessity of mastery over senses, and the importance of duty, ultimately revealing desire as the greatest obstacle to wisdom. By understanding the hierarchy, from senses to the mind, intellect, and finally the self, we learn to anchor ourselves in the divine, successfully conquering the enemy of desire and finding inner peace. Thank you for joining us in exploring these profound teachings from Chapter 3 of the Bhagavad Gita. May these insights guide you toward a life of purpose, duty, and spiritual clarity.